The lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel glittered with Christmas lights, casting warm amber reflections across marble floors. Ethan Hayes stood near the concierge desk in his navy blue vest, the uniform issued to maintenance staff working the holiday shift. He was adjusting his name tag when a woman in a white blazer dress seized his collar. Her blonde hair was twisted into a low bun, her eyes frantic yet cold with determination. "Pretend to be my husband." Right now. Before he could answer, she pulled him close and kissed him. The lobby fell silent. Across the room, a man in an expensive suit froze, his face draining of color. Ethan Hayes had learned to make himself small. Not physically, he was tall enough, broad-shouldered from years of manual labor. But in the way he moved through the world, he kept his head down, spoke only when necessary, and never lingered anywhere long enough for people to remember his face. It was a survival skill he'd perfected over the past 3 years. Ever since the accident that took his wife and left him alone with a 4-year-old daughter, who still asked when mommy was coming home. He worked 3 jobs to keep their heads above water. Mornings, he did maintenance at the Grand Meridian, one of those pristine 5-star hotels in downtown Chicago where guests dropped more on a single night's stay than he made in a week. Afternoons, he drove for a delivery service, hauling boxes up narrow apartment stairs until his knees ached. Evenings, when he could get the shifts, he picked up catering gigs or equipment breakdowns wherever they needed an extra pair of hands. Tonight was supposed to be simple. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had agreed to watch Sophie, and the hotel was paying time and a half for anyone willing to work the Christmas gala. All he had to do was keep the service elevators running and stay invisible. That was the plan. Stay invisible, collect the check, go home. Aurora Hale had made exactly 3 genuine mistakes in her 32 years, and all of them involved trusting the wrong man. The third was Marcus Thornhill, the venture capitalist she'd agreed to marry in a moment of exhaustion disguised as romance. When she discovered his plan to stage a boardroom coup and called off the wedding, he'd smiled and told her she'd regret it. He'd been right. For 6 months, he'd been systematically dismantling everything she'd built. Tonight was supposed to change that. The Grandmont Group was ready to sign a partnership that would inject $2 billion into Hale Capital and cement her position. Then she'd seen Marcus standing by the entrance, scanning the crowd, looking for her. She ducked behind a column, hard hammering, and spotted Ethan. She'd noticed him once before, 3 weeks ago in the parking garage. He'd held the elevator door without being asked, hadn't tried to make conversation, hadn't stared at her like she was a prize to be won. He just stood there quietly, then nodded and disappeared. That memory made the decision. She needed someone Marcus didn't know, someone who wouldn't be impressed by money or intimidated by power, someone who looked at her like she was just a person. The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds. To Ethan, it felt like falling through ice. When she finally pulled back, her hand was still gripping his collar, and he could feel her trembling. Not theatrical trembling, but the real thing. The kind that came from a nervous system in full revolt. "Come with me," she whispered, pulling him toward the service hallway. The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft chime. The sudden silence was deafening. "What are you doing?" Ethan finally found his voice. She leaned against the wall, breathing like she'd just run a marathon. Up close, without the lobby lights and the audience, she looked younger, more fragile. "I'm sorry," she said. And he believed her. "I just saw him, and I panicked." "Saw who?" "My ex-fiancé. He's been following me for weeks, and when I saw him tonight, I just needed to do something that would throw him off." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "Something he wouldn't expect. So you kissed a complete stranger?" "Yes. And I know that's insane, but I was out of options, and you were there, and you've always been kind to me." She lowered her hands, eyes red-rimmed. "But that kiss wasn't for the crowd. It was for me." "What?" "If I hadn't done something, anything, I would have frozen. Marcus would have seen me freeze, and he would have known I'm scared of him. I can't let him win. Not tonight." Her voice cracked. Ethan recognized the edge she was standing on. He'd stood there himself, in the hospital corridor, in the funeral home, in the dark hours after Sophie finally fell asleep. 10 minutes, Aurora said, straightening. "Just stand next to me for 10 minutes. Let him see that I'm not alone. Ethan thought about Sophie, about the overtime pay, about every sensible reason to say no. Then he thought about the way she'd looked at him in that elevator 3 weeks ago. Like he mattered. 10 minutes, he heard himself say. They stepped back into the lobby like actors taking the stage. Aurora's hand slid into the crook of Ethan's elbow, her fingers digging in slightly. The crowd had mostly returned to their conversations, but heads still turned. Whispers rippled through the room. They crossed toward the ballroom entrance, where a small group had gathered. That's where Ethan saw Marcus. Tall, silver-haired at the temples, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car. His eyes tracked Aurora's approach with predatory focus. "Aurora," Marcus said smoothly. "I didn't realize you'd be bringing a guest." "Marcus." Aurora's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't realize you'd be here at all. The Grandmont Group invited me personally." The threat was casual. "How interesting that you're suddenly so concerned about my business relationships." "Not sudden at all." His gaze slid to Ethan, dismissive. "Though I see your taste in companions hasn't improved." Aurora's grip tightened, and something in Ethan shifted. He extended his hand with confidence he didn't feel. Ethan Hayes. Aurora's husband. The word dropped like a stone into still water. Marcus stared. "Husband," he repeated flatly. "That's right. We've been married about a year now." Ethan glanced at Aurora. "Isn't that right, honey?" "A year and 2 months," Aurora said softly. "We had a small ceremony. Very private." Marcus's jaw tightened. How convenient that no one knew about this. "We didn't see the need to make an announcement," Ethan said. "Some things are worth keeping between the people who matter." The older couple Marcus had been talking to were staring openly, their expressions shifting to something like approval. A woman in a red dress actually smiled at Aurora, raising her glass. It was working. Marcus looked like someone had rearranged his chessboard without permission. "If you'll excuse us," Aurora said, guiding Ethan away, "we should say hello to the Grandmont Group representatives." They didn't make it to the Grandmont Group. Aurora's composure lasted until they reached the service corridor. Then shattered like fine crystal, she pushed through a door marked staff only into a small break room. 3 steps inside, her knees buckled. Ethan caught her elbow, guided her to a plastic chair. She sat heavily, breathing in short gasps. He filled a paper cup with water, brought it back, then draped his jacket over her shoulders. The weight of it seemed to ground her. Her breathing started to slow. When she finally looked up, the CEO was gone. What remained was just a woman who'd been running on empty too long. "I'm sorry you have to see this." "See what?" "A human being having a human reaction?" Ethan sat across from her. "You just walked into a room with a guy who's been stalking you, and lied to his face. Most people would need a minute. Most people don't have to lie about being married to a stranger they assaulted in a hotel lobby." Despite everything, there was humor in her voice. "Calling yourself my husband might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in months, so we'll call it even." She laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. Under the fluorescent lights, Ethan could see the exhaustion written into her face. The shadows under her eyes. She looked like someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to put down the weight of the world. "How long has he been doing this?" 6 months. "Since I called off the wedding." Aurora stared at the water cup. At first, just phone calls. Then he started showing up places. My office, my coffee shop, the gym at 5 in the morning. He never does anything illegal. Nothing I could get a restraining order for. He just appears. That's called stalking. That's called being strategic. Her voice turned bitter. Marcus doesn't make mistakes. Meanwhile, he's been systematically dismantling everything I've built. Talking to board members. Spreading rumors. Positioning himself as the stable alternative to the emotional woman who can't even maintain a relationship. "He's threatened by you," Ethan said. Aurora blinked. "What?" "That's why he's doing this. He can't handle it, so he's trying to make you small enough to control." Aurora's expression shifted. No one's ever put it that way before. Maybe no one's been looking at it right. They sat in silence. Beyond the door, the gala hummed on. You said 10 minutes. Aurora said finally. It's been longer than that. Yeah, well, turns out I'm bad at math. Aurora smiled, and it transformed her face. Then she stood, shoulders straightening, and the CEO slid back into place. I need to ask you something, Aurora said, and you're absolutely allowed to say no. Ethan had a feeling he knew where this was going. How many minutes are we talking about now? More than 10. She pulled his jacket tighter. The Grandmont Group partnership is contingent on board approval. My board is split between members who trust me and members who think Marcus might be right about my instability. If I walk out there alone, if they see Marcus rattled me, they'll start second-guessing. But if you walk out there married, they'll see a woman who's moved on, who's stable. I know this is insane. I know I have no right to ask. But I need you, Ethan, not just for 10 minutes. For the rest of tonight, maybe the next few days, until the contracts are signed and Marcus can't touch them. Ethan thought about Sophie waiting at Mrs. Chen's, about his 3 jobs, his carefully balanced life. Then he thought about the way Aurora had looked when she'd buckled in that chair. I'm a maintenance worker. I don't know anything about your world. I'm going to mess this up. You already saved me once tonight. When you called yourself my husband, you didn't hesitate. You just knew what I needed. That's not something I can teach someone. That's just who you are. She handed back his jacket. I won't pressure you. If you say no, I'll walk out there alone. But if you say yes, I'll make sure you're compensated. It was the last part that got him. The assumption that he'd want her gone after. Like helping her was a burden to be paid for and forgotten. Keep your money, Ethan said. If I do this, I'm not doing it for a paycheck. Then why would you do it? Because 3 years ago, someone had held his hand in a hospital and told him he didn't have to face the worst night alone. Because Sophie asked him if people could see them when they needed help, and he wanted to tell her yes. Because this woman had looked at him like he was real. Because nobody should have to deal with this alone, he said simply. Aurora's eyes went bright with tears. She blinked them back. Okay, she said quietly. She straightened, checking her reflection in the dark window, transforming from vulnerable to invincible in 30 seconds. But now Ethan knew what it cost. Ready? She asked. Not even a little bit. But let's do it anyway. They made the rounds. Aurora introduced Ethan to what felt like 100 people whose names he immediately forgot. He shook hands, smiled, and tried not to think about his shoes compared to everyone else's. The Grandmont Group representatives were easier than expected. Richard and Patricia asked where they'd met, how long they'd known each other, and what Ethan did. Aurora had coached him quickly. Keep it simple, keep it close to truth. He said they'd met at the hotel, had known each other 6 months, and he worked in building operations. All technically accurate. Patricia looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Ethan. Marcus kept his distance most of the night, but Ethan could feel him watching. Around 11, Marcus finally approached again. He'd clearly had more drinks, his smile loose and dangerous. I have to hand it to you, Aurora. This is impressive. How much are you paying him? Excuse me? Aurora's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. Come on, a maintenance worker who just happens to be conveniently available to play husband? Marcus laughed. How much? 10,000? 20? I'll double it if you walk away right now. Ethan felt Aurora start to pull away like she was going to run. Without thinking, he turned and pulled her close, one hand cupping her face. I'm not here for money, he said, loud enough for Marcus and others to hear. I'm here because my wife asked me to be, and I'd choose her over your best offer every single day. Then he kissed her. Not like the lobby kiss. Desperate and strategic. This one was softer. Deliberate. When he pulled back, Aurora was staring at him with wide eyes. Marcus looked slapped. Several people nearby had gone quiet, watching. Ready to go home? Ethan asked. And Aurora nodded. Mute. They left Marcus standing there. In the elevator, Aurora finally spoke. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, Ethan said. I did. The next morning, Ethan's phone started ringing at 6:30. He'd just dropped Sophie at preschool when the calls started. Unknown numbers. Local area codes. He ignored the first three, but when his manager texted, he pulled over. You need to see this, followed by a link. The link opened to a society blog. The headline read, Mystery Man Steals Hearts at Hale Capital Gala. Below was a photo of him and Aurora in the lobby. Right after that first kiss, the article was mostly speculation about Aurora's secret marriage. But the comments were uglier. People questioning whether he was real, whether he was paid, whether Aurora was so desperate she'd hired an actor. His phone rang again. Aurora. Have you seen the news? Just reading it now. I'm so sorry. My PR team is drafting a statement. But I wanted to warn you before Marcus goes after you. Before what? Before he tries to discredit both of us. He's already making calls, telling people you're an opportunist. That I'm paying you. Ethan sat in his car, watching morning traffic. He thought about his quiet life. His 3 jobs. Sophie's routine, the careful invisibility he'd built. All of it potentially crashing down. What do you need me to do? The silence lasted so long, he thought the call had dropped. Then Aurora said, What? You're fighting this guy for your company. I already said I was in. So what do you need? Ethan. You don't understand. Marcus is going to dig into your life. Your work history. Your family. He's going to try to find anything he can use. So let him dig. Ethan surprised himself with how calm he sounded. I've got nothing to hide. I work 3 jobs, I'm raising my daughter alone, and I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. If that's not good enough, then fuck Marcus Thornhill. Aurora laughed, shaky with relief. You can't say that in public. Watch me. His phone buzzed with more calls. I'm getting a lot of attention. Don't answer them. I'm sending security. And a lawyer. Just in case. Aurora paused. And Ethan? Thank you. Again. The security guy arrived within an hour, a man named Davis. The lawyer showed up that afternoon, Jennifer Chen, who asked 1,000 questions about his background. By evening, Ethan was exhausted. He picked up Sophie from Mrs. Chen's, who asked if he was that man from the internet. Sophie thought it was funny. You look silly, she said. Studying a photo. That lady's pretty, though. Is she a princess? Something like that. His phone rang. Aurora. I need you to come to my apartment. Marcus showed up at my office. Security escorted him out. But he's making threats. I'd feel better if you were here. Ethan looked at Sophie, coloring happily. I've got my daughter with me. Silence. Then, bring here. Aurora's penthouse overlooked the lake. The kind of place Ethan had only seen in magazines. Davis rode up with them. Sophie staring wide-eyed at all the buttons. This is like a castle, Sophie whispered. Aurora met them at the door in jeans and a sweater. Her hair down, face free of makeup, she looked younger. And terrified when she saw Sophie. Hi, Aurora said, crouching down. I'm Aurora. What's your name? Sophie Elizabeth Hayes. I'm 4 3/4. 4 3/4 is a very good age. Aurora smiled genuinely. I'm 32, and approximately 6 months. Sophie giggled. Ethan watched them, something tight in his chest loosening. They went inside. The apartment was enormous, and somehow still felt cold, but Aurora had made an effort. Coloring books and crayons on the coffee table. Pizza boxes. I wasn't sure what she'd like, Aurora said nervously. The internet said kids like pizza. The internet was right. Sophie ran to the windows, pressing her hands against the glass. Daddy, look. You can see the whole world. Aurora stood next to Ethan, shoulders almost touching. The lawyer wants to meet tomorrow, to go over the story. Make sure we're aligned on details. What kind of details? How we met. When we got married. Where we live. She glanced at him. That last one's tricky. Marcus knows where I live. He's going to question why my husband isn't living here. So I move in? For appearances. Until the contracts are signed. 2 weeks, maybe 3. What do I tell my daughter? The truth? That you're helping a friend. She's 4. She's going to ask questions. Then we'll answer them. Aurora turned to face him. I promise I'll do everything to make sure Sophie's comfortable. She can have her own room. Whatever you need. What he needed was for his life to make sense again. But that ship had sailed. Okay. 2 weeks. Moving in took less time than expected. Mostly because Ethan didn't own much. Some clothes. Sophie's toys. A few photos. Aurora had a guest room converted into a child's bedroom within 24 hours, complete with a race car bed and enough stuffed animals to start a zoo. Sophie loved it. Ethan felt like he was living someone else's life. The lawyer meetings were surreal. They spent hours building a relationship out of whole cloth. They'd met 6 months ago over a maintenance issue. Started talking, then dating. Then fell in love. Small courthouse wedding. Kept private after the disaster with Marcus. Simple, believable, utterly fake. But the more they rehearsed it, the more real it felt. They discovered actual common ground. Both early risers. Both liked coffee black. Both had complicated relationships with parents. Aurora's father had built Hale Capital from nothing and never forgiven her for being better at running it. Ethan's father had left when he was 12, and his mother spent his childhood reminding him he was the reason. We're both people who learned young that love comes with conditions. Aurora said one night after Sophie went to bed. What are your conditions? Ethan asked. She considered. Competence, control, never needing help. Those aren't conditions. Those are defense mechanisms. Aurora smiled sadly. What are yours? That I'll eventually let everyone down. He said it simply. A fact accepted years ago. My wife died because I was late. 10 minutes late picking her up. So she drove herself. And the accident happened. If I'd been on time, it wouldn't have mattered. Aurora interrupted. Accidents are accidents because they're not anyone's fault. Tell that to the part of my brain that runs through the scenario every night. They sat in silence. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent to their small tragedies. I'm sorry about your wife. And I'm sorry Marcus is trying to destroy your life. We're quite a pair, she said. Yeah, we really are. The attack came on a Thursday. Ethan was at the hotel, finishing a repair when Davis appeared with a tablet and a grim expression. You need to see this. Someone had leaked Ethan's employment records. The blog post laid out every detail of his financial situation. His 3 jobs, late rent payments from 2 years ago, the life insurance payout from his wife's death, photos of him in his work uniform, contrasted with gala images. The implication was clear. Aurora was so desperate she'd hired help. Literally. The comments were vicious. Gold digger. Trapped a vulnerable woman. Questioning his fitness as a father. A few even mentioned Sophie. Ethan sat down hard. His phone was blowing up. Manager wanting to talk. Delivery service with questions. Mrs. Chen asking if he was okay. And Aurora. 6 missed calls. He called her back. I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I'm having legal draft a defamation suit. That's not going to help. Everyone's going to believe it anyway. Then we go public. Do an interview. Tell the real story. What real story? I did pretend to be your husband. For money, technically, since you offered. You turned down the money. Nobody knows that. He pressed his palm to his forehead. Maybe Marcus is right. Maybe this was stupid from the start. Don't you dare. Her voice cracked. Don't let him win like this. I'm not the one fighting him. This isn't my world. It became your world the second you said you were my husband. She was almost shouting. You stood next to me in that ballroom. You kissed me in front of everyone. You moved into my apartment with your daughter. You don't get to walk away now just because it got hard. I'm not walking away because it got hard. I'm walking away because I'm making it worse for you. That's not your decision to make. I'm the one who kissed you first. I'm the one who asked you to lie. But I'm not giving up. On my company, on my reputation, or on you. Something in his chest cracked. Why not? Everyone else does. Because you're the first person in 3 years who looked at me like I wasn't a problem to be managed, Aurora said quietly. And I think maybe I'm the first person who looked at you like you weren't a tragedy to be pitied. We're not perfect, Ethan. But we're real. And that's worth fighting for. Ethan heard footsteps above. Davis, probably. He thought about Sophie playing with her race car bed. Thought about Aurora crouching down to introduce herself, nervous but trying. Thought about the life he'd built from invisibility, and whether it was worth protecting. Okay, he said. What do we do? What they did was fight back. Aurora's PR team arranged photos of them leaving Sophie's preschool together, looking like a normal family. They released a brief statement asking for privacy. Then Ethan did something Aurora hadn't asked for. He gave an interview to a local news station. The reporter met him in a coffee shop, cameras rolling. Was he really married to Aurora Hale? How did they meet? What about the allegations he was being paid? Ethan answered honestly. I am married to Aurora, yes. We met through the hotel. As for whether I'm being paid, I work 3 jobs to support my daughter. I'm not ashamed of that, and I'm not ashamed of my wife, who is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She doesn't need to pay someone to stand beside her. She just needed someone willing to do it. Maybe it's unusual for a CEO to marry a maintenance worker. But maybe that says more about your expectations than it does about us. The interview went viral within hours. Not everyone believed him, but enough did. Enough people shared it with comments about class prejudice and authentic love. Enough people started questioning why Marcus was so invested in destroying his ex-fiancee's happiness. The tide was turning. That night, Ethan came home to find Aurora on the couch. Sophie asleep with her head in Aurora's lap. Aurora was absently stroking Sophie's hair while she typed. She looked up when he came in. Hi. Hi. He sat down carefully. Did you see the interview? I saw it. Aurora closed her laptop. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You said we were in this together. That goes both ways. She smiled, tired but genuine. The Grandmont Group called. They're ready to sign tomorrow morning. That's good. It is. She looked down at Sophie. She's wonderful. You've done an incredible job. Thanks. Ethan felt the familiar ache. Her mom would have been better at it. Maybe, but she's not here. You are. And you're enough, Ethan. You've always been enough. The words settled into him, filling spaces he hadn't realized were empty. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan let himself imagine that maybe she was right. The truth came out by accident. Ethan had been going through paperwork for Sophie's preschool, using Aurora's address now, when he'd found a folder labeled Hale Capital, confidential mixed in with documents Aurora had given him. He'd opened it without thinking. Inside were financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts, and Marcus Thornhill's signature on documents clearly showing embezzlement from Hale Capital dating back 4 years. Ethan stared at the papers, mind racing. This wasn't just leverage. This was criminal evidence. He found Aurora in her home office, on a video call. She saw his face and immediately ended it. What's wrong? He handed her the folder. Her face went white. Where did you get this? It was in the paperwork you gave me. I think someone at your office included it by mistake. If this is real. She was shaking. Has your legal team seen this? No. I didn't even know it existed. We need to get this somewhere safe. Tonight. They called Jennifer Chen, who arrived within an hour with a notary and courier. The documents were copied, certified, and sent to 3 separate secure locations before midnight. Then they waited. Marcus showed up at Aurora's building the next morning, somehow bypassing security. pounding on her door. "I know you have them," he shouted through the door. "Whatever you think you found, it's fake. You're trying to frame me." Aurora stood frozen in her living room, Sophie hiding behind Ethan's legs. Davis was calling additional security. Marcus's voice rose. "If you don't give them back, I swear to God, Aurora, I will destroy you. I'll destroy him. I'll destroy that little girl if I have to." That's when something in Ethan broke. He pulled out his phone, started recording, and opened the door. Marcus was red-faced, sweating, suit rumpled. He looked like a man coming apart. "Say that again," Ethan said calmly. "About my daughter." Marcus focused on him, genuine hatred in his eyes. "You think you're clever? I will take everything from you. Your jobs, your custody, your pathetic little life. I will make sure you regret ever meeting her." "Good to know." Ethan was still recording. "Now get out before I call the police." "You can't prove anything. Those documents are circumstantial at best." "Then you've got nothing to worry about." Ethan stepped forward, and Marcus retreated. "But if I were you, I'd be more concerned that you just threatened a 4-year-old on camera." Marcus's face went slack. He'd forgotten about the phone. Security arrived and escorted Marcus out. Ethan locked the door and turned to find Aurora standing there. Sophie pressed against her side. Aurora was crying, not controlled tears but full sobs. He went to her, put his arms around both of them. "It's over," he said. "He's done. He threatened Sophie." Aurora choked out. "He threatened your baby. And we have it recorded. Along with everything else." He pulled back to see her face. "Aurora, it's over. You won." She kissed him then. Not for an audience. Not as strategy, just because she wanted to. And Ethan kissed her back. When they broke apart, Sophie was looking up with wide eyes. "Are you guys married for real now?" she asked. Aurora laughed through tears. "I think we might be." The contracts with the Grandmont Group were signed in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Aurora was in her element, commanding the room with quiet authority. Board members who doubted her were notably silent. Marcus wasn't there. He was dealing with federal investigators interested in those offshore accounts. Ethan watched from the corner and felt strangely proud. After the signatures and handshakes, Richard from Grandmont approached Ethan. "You're a good man. Taking care of her like this." "I'm not taking care of her," Ethan corrected gently. "She doesn't need taking care of. I'm just standing beside her." Richard smiled. "That's what I meant." When the room cleared, it was just Ethan and Aurora. She stood at the window, shoulders tight. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "I should be celebrating." Aurora didn't turn around. "Everything I fought for is secure now. Marcus is facing charges. The board is united. I won. But now I have to go back to my empty apartment and empty life and pretend the last 2 weeks didn't change everything." She finally turned. "You're going to leave now. Go back to your 3 jobs and small apartment. Take Sophie and return to normal." That was the agreement. 2 weeks. Until the contracts were signed. Aurora laughed. Hollow. "Right. The agreement." She pulled off her wedding ring, the fake one. Held it out. "Thank you for your service." Ethan didn't take it. "Aurora, please don't make this harder." Her voice cracked. "You helped me. I'm grateful. Now we both go back to our real lives." "What if I don't want to?" The words surprised them both. Aurora stared. "What? What if I don't want to go back?" Ethan stepped closer. "What if the last 2 weeks, the fake marriage and shared apartment and playing house, what if that felt more real than anything in my life has felt in 3 years? You're confused. You've been through trauma, we both have, and sometimes people bond." "Don't." He caught her hand, the one holding the ring. "Don't rationalize this. Don't make it smaller than it is. Ethan, you don't want this. You don't want me. I'm complicated and damaged and my life is never going to be normal. I watched my wife die in a hospital room while our daughter colored pictures in the waiting room, Ethan said quietly. Normal left my life a long time ago. I'm not looking for normal, Aurora. I'm looking for real. And you're the most real thing I've found. Aurora was crying again, silent tears tracking through makeup. I don't know how to do this. The real version. What if I'm terrible at it? Then we'll figure it out together. He took the ring and slipped it back on her finger. For real this time. No agreements. No exit clauses. Just us. She threw her arms around him, and he caught her. Sophie's going to think I'm crazy, Aurora said against his shoulder. Sophie already asked me this morning if you were going to be her new mom. Aurora pulled back. What did you tell her? That I'd have to ask you first. They took it slow, slower than made sense for two people who'd already lived together and weathered a corporate war. Ethan moved back to his apartment, and Aurora came to visit. They had actual dates, dinners and movies and long walks along the lake. Sophie came sometimes, learning to hold both their hands, claiming she was building a bridge. The press coverage eventually died down. Marcus pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud, received a suspended sentence, and disappeared from public life. Hale Capital's stock reached record highs. Ethan quit 2 of his 3 jobs and enrolled in night school to finish his engineering degree. Aurora cut back her hours, started therapy, and learned to cook 3 meals that didn't come from delivery. They were clumsy at it, at the ordinary work of building a real relationship, but they were trying. 6 months after the gala, on a Sunday afternoon in the park, Sophie ran ahead to the playground, while Ethan and Aurora walked behind, fingers loosely interlaced. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Aurora admitted. For you to realize this is too much work. It is too much work, Ethan agreed. Most things worth having are. Sophie called to them from the top of the slide, waving enthusiastically. Aurora waved back. Do you ever regret it? That night in the hotel? Ethan considered. I regret what you went through. I regret Marcus existed. But us? No. I don't regret us. Sophie asked me something yesterday, Aurora said. She asked if I was going to be her mom for real, or just for pretend. What did you tell her? I told her I'd have to ask her dad first. She stopped walking, turned to face him. So I'm asking, not about pretending, about the real thing. All of it. The morning chaos and terrible jokes and bills and ordinary, boring, beautiful parts of building a life together. Ethan pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Yes. Yes. Yes to all of it. He tipped her chin up. Yes to Sophie. Yes to us. Yes to every complicated, messy, real thing that comes with it. Aurora smiled. The kind that reached her eyes. Okay then. Sophie came running back, breathless and demanding they watch her slide. Aurora crouched to her level. Sophie, I need to tell you something important. Sophie's eyes went wide. What? I talked to your dad. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to be your mom. For real this time. Not just pretend. Sophie looked between them, processing. Then she launched herself at Aurora with enough force to nearly knock her over. Does this mean you'll live with us all the time? If you'll have me. And you'll read me bedtime stories? Every night. And you'll come to my school things? Aurora's voice went thick. I wouldn't miss them for anything. Sophie pulled back, very serious. Okay. But you have to promise one more thing. Anything. You have to promise to keep kissing Daddy, because when you do, he doesn't look sad anymore. Aurora looked up at Ethan, eyes bright. I can definitely promise that. Ethan pulled them both into his arms, his small family, the one he'd never expected to have. Sophie wiggled between them, giggling. This is better than pretend, she announced. Aurora met Ethan's eyes over Sophie's head. Yeah, Ethan said softly. It really is.